Welcome to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc., where we feature experts in growth and brand visibility for law firms and architecture, engineering, and construction firms. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, it's Michelle Calcote-King here. I'm the host of this show and also the principal and president of Reputation Inc. We're a public relations and content marketing agency for professional services firms, including architecture, engineering, and construction firms. We understand how sophisticated corporate buyers find and select AEC firms. For the past 10 years, we've helped firms grow through thought leadership fueled strategies, including media relations, byline article placement, blogging, email marketing, video marketing, social media, and more. To learn more, go to rep-inc, that's inc with a K.com, or email us at info@rep-inc.com. So our guest today is Howie Ferguson. He's the executive director at the Construction Owners Association of America. And that's a national organization of public and private owners who manage facilities development and capital improvement projects. The organization supports owners' success in the design and construction of buildings and facilities through education, information, and collaboration. Prior to joining COAA, as it's called, in 2018, Howie spent 28 years as an institutional owner, including 19 years at the University of Florida's Division of Planning, Design, and Construction, and more than 9 years as a commissioned officer in the U.S. Navy's Civil Engineers Corps. So thank you so much for joining me, Howie.
Thanks for having me, Michelle. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this discussion because so many of our listeners are targeting your members as clients, potential clients. So let's first talk about the Construction Owners Association of America. Tell me who it serves.
Well, as the name actually throws a lot of people off who aren't in our industry. It even throws a few people in our industry off. Construction owners. Again, for those outside the industry, so it's folks who own construction companies. Like, no, we're actually the clients of builders and designers. Yeah. Obviously, people in the industry know that. But it's a little late. We're 28 years in. We're not going to change our name now to something more understandable. But we are all about the owner, the client, the entity or person with the itch to scratch, the space to improve or renovate or expand or build. We also, though, have memberships for the service providers that serve those owners, like designers and builders and software vendors and construction law attorneys. So we have both as members.
Oh, great. So tell me, how does the association differ from other construction industry associations?
Yeah, great question. And there's a lot of them, right? The alphabet soup.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of great ones. So one obvious distinction is we are all about owners. We're not the only, but we're one of very few industry organizations focused on owners. But there's two or three other things that we believe are pretty unique about COAA. One is something we may talk more about later, but there's a kind of a mindset, sort of an intangible, tangible thing called the COAA Way. It's not anything weird. You don't have to do a seance or drink anything. It's just a mindset that has to do with fairness and collaboration and continuous improvement that most of our owner members really seem to subscribe to, maybe even before they came to COAA. We have an owner training institute that now just having training, that's not unique. What is unique, though, is that these courses are all for owners. That is unique. And the content was all developed by owners. So that's pretty unique. And also just we aren't, not that all organizations are, but we are less tech focused and more of a generalist approach to those things that are sort of common issues or challenges or problems, regardless of what it is you're building or how big it is.
Yeah.
So those are some things that kind of distinguished COAA.
Yeah. And tell me about your members. So are they heavy in certain industries or types of facilities that they're doing? If you could describe kind of a typical member.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a typical member, but for sure, demographics, just for the owner, remember, we have members who are owners and members, we call them associates, who are service providers to owners. But just looking at the owner pie, if you will, the biggest piece, the biggest sector of owners we have is higher ed. higher education, colleges, universities, small ones, big ones, and entire university systems. University of Wisconsin system, the University of Georgia system, and the California State University system just joined. So all the way from systems to small community colleges. That's the biggest piece. Roughly 45% of our owner members are higher ed, which makes sense, right? They're serial building, always renovating, always expanding, always building. The next biggest piece is government, which is kind of a broad swath, but it's everything in our case from cities, counties, and states, all the way to the federal government. GSA, all 11 regions in their central office are members of COAA. So that's the second biggest piece. The third biggest piece is healthcare. And again, there's a range within the range. There's very small regional hospitals all the way up to systems and MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas. And then the other pieces of the pie, Michelle, are smaller, 5 to 8%, everything from K-12 to kind of a growing one, sort of a biomed farm, that sort of area. And actually, two of our most recent joins, newest members, are from sectors we haven't tracked before, but we're really excited to grow. Chick-fil-A and Amazon recently became members. So we like the diversification because, again, whether you're building a restaurant or an airport or a data center or a higher ed research facility, most of what we're talking about, most of the content that comes from COAA really has very little to do with the building type. So it kind of makes sense.
Are the majority of your owners, it sounds like they're vertical construction. Do you have any horizontal, like infrastructure, transportation, that kind of thing? When you mentioned government, it made me think about that.
Great question. Yeah, great question. No, for the most part, we don't. And I've always wondered, you may know, even though I've been in the industry a while, even utilities, which you could argue are sort of a tweener. They're horizontal, but they're kind of vertical too. Right. Plants, power plants. Yeah. We have a handful of utility owners, but in fact, zero departments of transportation or those sorts of owner horizontal entities. No, it's a great potential area for us down the road, again, because no pun intended, down the road. But because, again, what we're talking about isn't so much about, asphalt specs. It's about project leadership.
Right. Yeah. That's great. So tell me, you kind of started to touch on it, but I'd love to understand sort of the types of education that you're offering members, because that speaks to really what owners need to know and understand, which, my types of clients, the architecture, engineering, and construction firm in the audience for this podcast need to be kind of clued into. So what are some of those? Tell me about that education that you're offering.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to break it up. The easiest, simplest way is probably to talk about those educational offerings that are available to anyone, member or not, owner or not, and then those that are kind of reserved for members. So on the former, these are primarily events. We have 2 national conferences every year. These are 2.5 to 3 day events, not in a set rotation. We sort of bounce them around the country in different cities. A little bit unique to do 2 per year, but going all the way back to COAA's founding in 1994, the idea was to move them around so that if you're a member anywhere in the country, every 2 to 3 years, you should be able to get to one with a drive or a short flight. That was kind of the mindset. So these are not large events, at least right now. They're kind of boutique, 250 to 300 pre-COVID. But it's nice. It's an intimate, sort of intense in a good way. A lot of content.
The best. Yeah, that side. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You feel like it's a little more intimate and friendly. But the common thread, Michelle, is it's a lot of folks who are, I lovingly call them, because I used to be a member when I was an owner. I can say this, I guess. They're kind of dorks. They're in a good way, like people who are thirsting to learn from their peers and just get better. There's also a nice kind of safe ratio for owners. These are typically, we don't mandate this, we don't control it. It just kind of seems to work out where somewhere between 50 and 60, sometimes even 65% of the attendees are owners. So they don't feel like at some events that an owner might go to, they're overwhelmed. It's 5 or 10%, and everyone is marketing to them. That doesn't feel like that at a COAA event.
Yeah, you need those spaces. You need those spaces to actually just be with your cohorts and to be able to feel like you're not being sold to. So there's definitely a need for that.
Right. So the conferences are one thing, and again, that's members, non-members, and anybody, everybody. Um, Sort of a tier down, we have 10 chapters, not in certainly in every region or state. It's kind of East Coast dominated. We're
Mm-hmm.
working on that. Those chapters, it varies a little bit. There's not a set pattern, but for the most part, those chapters hold spring and fall workshops each year, or social events, or both.
Mm-hmm.
These are typically half day, sometimes more than a half day. Like Texas is our largest chapter. Everything's bigger in Texas, right? So their events are always bigger with more people and typically more than a day long. But for the most part, these are half day, day long events, pretty modestly priced. If you remember, maybe it's 30 or 40 or $50 or something. But like with the conferences, they come with continuing ed credits. So it's worthwhile, good stuff. Um, and then the third prong of the kind of the educational platform that's open to anyone, members or not, is that Owner Training Institute I mentioned earlier. These are classes that are either we host them and it's open registration, but a lot of times, I'd say 75% of the OTI classes are an owner organization that requests that we bring one of the classes to them, which is genius because now their people don't have to travel. We do the traveling. So that's kind of cool. Then when you get into the members only kind of stuff, Michelle, it's less about events and it's more about peer-to-peer and content, video, written, et cetera. For example, we have a digital magazine that publishes twice a year. We have something called an e-catalog, which is kind of like a repository of Dodge Smart Market reports and white papers and template contracts, stuff that an owner or anyone could borrow from, plagiarize from, cannibalize, whatever. We have an interesting recent thing. Maybe it's a COVID related. I don't know, but where some of our volunteers, mostly owners, are themselves authoring content that we're publishing. As an example, our Georgia chapter has become prolific at this, where maybe it's an opinion piece. Remember, one of our members wrote something about leadership during tough times, and other times it's more of a case study. Hey, here's this really interesting historic repurposing of a building. So that's kind of a cool trend, right? Where it's kind of informal, but it's useful content that people all around the country are getting some benefit from. And then the last thing that's a members only is we have something called the e-forum. It's a Teams, Microsoft Teams based thing where you can reach out to your peers and ask a question. Hey, has anyone ever built one of these before? Or has anyone ever faced this challenge? And you'll get a few people responding or picking up the phone, calling you. And as a spinoff from that, once a month, we have a live discussion, members only. That's really cool because it's informal. No slide deck, no continuing ed credits. It's just a facilitated discussion, sometimes about whatever people want to talk about, and sometimes on a specific subject. One of the topics in the middle of COVID was employee morale and mental health. Let's get it out there and talk about it. So really interesting.
Yeah, that's really valuable. Is there opportunities for AEC firms to do presentations, contribute content, that kind of thing? Is that where how much of that is from your AEC partners?
A lot with an asterisk, especially at the national conferences. We strongly encourage, underline boldface, that owners be part of any presentation. This is a by owners, for owners thing. But that thing I hinted at earlier, Michelle, the COAA Way, an element of that is that all three legs of the stool matter. There is no project without the owner, but there's no project without someone to design it and someone to build it. All three parties matter. It's kind of like the IPD approach to being an organization. All three of the entities and all the other players matter. So as an example, I've mentioned now a couple of times this Owner Training Institute. Those courses, and we're super proud of this, they're all presented. These are day and a half or 2 day long courses, pretty intense subject matter. They're all presented by an owner, a design professional, and a builder. And people have to apply. These are typically pretty experienced professionals who are still working for the most part. So there's an example where, heck yeah, the AEC community is embedded in our educational offerings. They're a huge part of it. And at the chapter level, same thing. We always encourage folks to, hey, if it's you presenting as a service or as a service provider, bring one of your clients, one of your owner clients, and both of y'all can present. So that's kind of our favorite.
Yeah, it's a great strategy. One, to get in front of potential clients, but two, to showcase your expertise and experience in a way that's not salesy. So, perfect opportunity. Let's talk. I'd like to kind of pick your brains a little bit for our audience in terms of kind of what's at the top of your members' minds right now. Like, what are you seeing in terms of their priorities?
Yeah, it's a what's the phrase about living in interesting times? I think we're there. So I'd say, Michelle, and in thinking about talking with you a little bit about before this, the thing that came to mind was, can someone please stop the world from spinning? And I don't mean literally, but like, it's like, is this ever going to, like, not just pandemic, but then we have the market explosion and the problem with material delays. And now we have Russia invading Ukraine. Like, the gas prices are going crazy. It's sort of like, stop the madness.
Right.
And frankly, none of us have a solution for certainly all of that or even any of that, other than when it comes to materials and costs and stuff. Obviously, owners, for the most part, are building in much bigger allowances and escalation percentages when they're doing project planning and estimating. But gosh, I think it's just it's one thing to deal with a problem, a market explosion or an implosion like in 2008. It's another thing to have thing on top of thing on top of thing. And honestly, Michelle, and this is not just our industry, I'm hearing a lot of folks that are just kind of worn out from not even so much Zoom fatigue, but how things have changed in the virtual or hybrid world where meetings are now back to back to back to back to back because they can be. And there's no time to think.
Right.
So that seems to be a common, on top of all that other global stuff. That's and it kind of sounds like, first world problems, but I don't know. It may be contributing to exhaustion and mental health problems. So
burnout. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Yep. We're seeing that. And that's sort of industry agnostic, right? Where it's just, but I can see, especially in the construction world, how the pandemic has just really upended that industry in a way that other industries don't quite face in terms of delays. Are you seeing that as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And honestly, Michelle, I don't remember the source. I'm sorry. I should be citing the source, but anyone hearing this could Google it, I'm sure. We had a session at our fall conference in November, which is in a suburb of Las Vegas, our first in-person event in 2 years. And that particular conference had a theme. It was all about the people, which is very much tied to the COAA Way, right? Where you can have all the tech, BIM, lean, IPD, all that stuff is great, but projects still come down to people. That's kind of what the COAA Way is all about. So the whole conference kind of had that theme. Well, one of the sessions that played off of that was on mental health. And the presenters talked early in their 45 minutes or so. And I had no idea. And I've been in the industry 30 years. Construction has the second highest suicide rate of any industry.
Wow. I did not know that either. Wow.
I didn't either. And I wish I knew the source or the site, or, hey, is that current? Is that for the last 10 years? I don't remember. But clearly, there's a problem. Yeah. A serious one. And so what are the answers? Well, like with life, the answers are get it out there. Don't hide it. Talk about it, even if whether that's in staff meetings or counseling or whatever. The stigma that our parents and their parents, that generation, mental health, that's for those days are over. Get it out there and talk about it. That's step one.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm going to look that up too and have a look at that stat, because that is very important to talk about.
And also, Michelle, not to
please
beat the horse to death, but seriously, you and I both have been around in this industry long enough to know that, and I can say this as part of the problem, if you will, it's been an industry of kind of old white guys for a long time. And with an emphasis on the older, I'd say. And so again, and you're testosterone laden, get it done, meet the deadline, and all that's kind of cool and fun. but not when it's at the expense of human beings. And I think our industry in the last, I don't know, definitely pre-COVID, 8 to 10 years, and I think COAA has played a very small role in that, of getting out and just talking about things like soft skills, which I hate the term, but it's true. If you don't have people skills, you're not going to survive in this industry.
Yeah.
And wrapping your head around that, and now mental health, these other things, to me, it speaks to our industry has begun to kind of grow up a little bit. That's my take.
Absolutely. Well, the world is becoming more diverse, so it's important that just to operate at an effective level, that the industry looks at that. So let's talk about, because I'm in marketing, so I'm helping my clients market themselves to your members. How is the procurement process changing? And I know this can vary depending on the industry, but are you seeing any changes there in terms of how owners are selecting AEC firms, how they're assessing them, that kind of thing?
Not specifically in terms of process or, hey, we're weighting this more or this less. What the thing that strikes me, it may be almost too obvious, but when something happens, a global pandemic, and then we have to react to it, it's always interesting when it's obviously not over, but it has certainly begun to subside, and we're accustomed to it now. If we got to wear a mask, we wear a mask. We got to we get all that. It's interesting to think about things that stick even after they aren't required anymore. And where I'm headed with that is virtual everything, meetings, design review meetings, and selections. Like some of our owner members are saying, no, we kind of like the virtual interview thing, which is a hard adjustment at first, but now, we kind of have figured it out. We know what not to do and what to do. And frankly, we're saving not ourselves so much, but these folks who are pursuing our work, a lot of money just on traveling in hotel rooms. And the good owner, the COAA Way thinking kind of owner, they care about that. Like, I don't want you spending a bunch of money pursuing a project you may not get. And so that is the thing that stands out is virtual. I think there's a place for it. Obviously none of us want to do everything virtual. It's probably a mixture. That's the thing that stands out is how has this procurement process changed, especially with interviews when it comes to virtual instead of in person.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because it does require sometimes a different skill set. It requires a different thinking in terms of how you're presenting your qualifications. There's things you can accomplish in person that you have to really think through virtually. It is a shift. And that's a lot of what, honestly, I'm helping a lot of clients do is, create presentations and ways they can communicate things that were a lot easier to communicate in person, but now they have to be a little more thoughtful in how they do that virtually. So,
and Michelle, honestly, I was surprised to hear it. Again, this isn't a scientific poll. This doesn't speak to every owner, but anecdotally, informally, discussions in the last year with several of our owner members, public and private, large and small. I was kind of surprised because again, I haven't been an owner in 3.5 years. So the last time I was an owner, we didn't have a pandemic and Zoom. Who's using Zoom? Right. So I was surprised to learn that at least half of them were like, no, we kind of like it once we got used to it. I was like, really? Because to me, it's hard enough to measure. When I was an owner at University of Florida and I was doing major projects or projects where I'm going to be working with these design teams, for example, for anywhere from 2 years to 5 years, depending on the size of the project. Chemistry and culture and all that stuff matters. And it was hard enough to figure that out with an in-person 1 hour, 2 hour thing. How do you do that over Zoom? I was just, but owners are saying for other reasons, they like it. So,
and not to, but that's where a lot of the other kind of marketing firms can do. And that's why, honestly, I'm seeing AEC firms do much more marketing than they've ever done before, because you have to communicate, who are you as a company? What are your values? How do you work? And owners can now sort of self-guide themselves through that information, especially if they're not getting that face face to face. They're going to sell. They're going to get on that website. They're going to look at your social media. They want to get a sense of who you are. That's still important. But that's why, more firms are, creating videos to talk about who they are. They're more active on social media. They're, those kinds of things that help communicate those things that are still important. But you're just not getting that. You're not getting that opportunity to convey it in person. So, we're seeing an uptick. On that similar vein, are you seeing any trends that impact how AEC firms should communicate? And maybe this is really what we just talked about, but how they market to owners. Are there any things that you're seeing that AEC firms should know?
Honestly, Michelle, I don't mind saying this. No, I don't. Not applicable, moot, can't answer it, don't know, because again, I'm not a practicing owner and I haven't had that specific discussion with our members. I'm smart enough to know what I don't know, so I'm not sure. Here's what I do know, though. Yeah. Something that has not changed. COVID cannot or did not impact this, and that is at least the owners that kind of run in COAA circles kind of crave authenticity. That's, like vulnerability and some other words these days, it may be on the verge of being kind of overused, but it's true. I think it's the be yourself kind of thing. Yeah. That to me, now again, of course, you have to, best foot forward and first impression and professionalism, all that stuff. Yes, when it comes to marketing, pursuing a project, submitting a proposal, doing an interview, all that stuff matters. But I don't know, at least for those of us who like to think they have a decent, pardon the phrase, BS meter, I don't know. I just want you to be yourself. And then we'll determine if that self is going to be a good fit with us in this particular project.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. And it can get lost, especially, again, I'm on the marketing side helping AEC firms. But there is a way to do that while still thinking through your message, presenting yourself professionally. But it's utterly important to be authentic and to be true to, who are we really as a company? What value do we provide? What is our true expertise? And to not really step outside that lane, and to be a real partner to clients. There's a way to do that through how you market your company. And, the technologies that are coming out, the more people are used to things like social media and, just the internet in general and finding providers and interacting with them. There's a way to be authentic through how you market and communicate. But it starts with you yourself defining who you are. So, and I think that's where a lot of AEC firms fail. They don't really think that through. And if you haven't really kind of put a stake in the ground about who you are as a firm, it's hard to live that out in your marketing. So
Michelle, just real quick, sorry, but it occurred to me out of nowhere. Well, not out of nowhere. It's exactly what you were talking about. But several years ago, at least 3.5, because that's when I was an owner at UF. It was probably more like 6 or 8 years ago. And I don't remember the firm or the person. If I did, I wouldn't tell you anyway. But I asked a question that I had never asked before, and I don't even remember why I asked it. But I asked something someone said in an interview setting just caused my brain to go here. And I asked them, why do you do this?
Yeah.
And I don't mean do this like propose for our project, but why do you like being in architecture? And I wouldn't want to do a disservice to the fantastic answer I got, but it was something that sounded so genuine. It wasn't kissing up. It wasn't marketing. It was just from the heart. Mm-hmm. They ended up getting the project. That's not why, but that connection, that feeling I got from the answer that felt like whether you like it or not, here's the truth, that resonated with me. So yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. And a lesson that everyone can take on, because it's important because people want to work with people who are passionate about what they do, that do have a real reason for being in it. It's a great point. So the last thing I want to ask you about is the COAA Way. I did see a little bit about that on your website, but kind of talk me through that and what AEC firms need to know about that. Well, I think not just AEC firms, but everyone if you think about the enormous cast of characters in our industry, those who sell software and the attorneys, even if we're not suing each other, they help with all the players in this. It's an enormous cast. All of those folks should love this idea of the COAA Way, because again, it's something that's kind of and I have it up on our website. Michelle, I typically wouldn't do this, but I'll do the brief version of the definition. It's based on the principle that a team of people, underscore, boldface, people, led by a good owner, in quotes, and I'll explain why that's in quotes, good owner, sharing best practices in a culture built on trust and respect, will complete better projects. And I would add on there, and have a better time doing it.
Right.
Which kind of does matter. Back to the, why do you do this? And well, I want to feel like I contributed and did something tangible, and I want to have fun. I want to enjoy what I'm doing. So that's the COAA Way. It's not a cookbook. It's not a recipe. It's not do this and everything will be great. It's more of an, like I said, an intangible, tangible thing that speaks to the value of people. And again, I kind of said this earlier, but most of our members in COAA itself, are in love with most of the things our industry has done in the last 20 years to get better, building information modeling and prefab and IPD and lean, and you can go on and on. But some of those, or some of the strongest advocates of those, sometimes forget that you can tech out all you want, and you can model all you want, and you can lean all you want, but you better still value and leverage people. That's kind of what this is about. And so AEC's partners should love this. There's also built into this, Michelle, kind of we don't say this anywhere, but there's a implied sense of humility, which goes back to this thing about good owner. The good owner is one that AEC partners want to work for. Right. That was my goal. My goal at UF when I was an owner and a project manager was to do a great project and satisfy the internal user group. But I also wanted to leave an impression, even with folks who applied for a job or maybe even interviewed for it and didn't get. I wanted them to come back and want to work for us. That was a goal, an actual unwritten stated goal. That's kind of an element of this COAA Way thing. Be that owner that people want to work for and work with. And that's a very good thing that AEC partners should adore.
Yeah. Well, you're going to get better work from your partners when you are somebody that they want to work for. So that's just, you're going to get a better outcome, and not that you should do it for that reason, but that's going to happen if people like to work for you.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And again, another anecdote, but it's true. And this wasn't just me. It was kind of the whole office, at least at that time. We took really seriously the idea of debriefing folks who had applied for a job or even gotten to the interview stage, but didn't get it. And a lot of folks debrief, but a lot of folks kind of mail it in. Some owners like, okay, well, you finished third and you were fine, but we just picked the other. Like, there's no well, we kind of, I know I did, and most of my colleagues at UF were really serious about giving like pretty candid, sorry if this hurts your feelings, but here's the feedback. And typically it wouldn't be feeling hurting kind of thing. A lot of times it would be, you guys were fine. The other guys just did better. Well, what did they do that was better? Okay, I'll tell you. They were this, or they were more authentic, or whatever. And I got a lot of feedback, Michelle, over the years that said, well, we're still kind of bummed about your decision, and we frankly think we're a better team than the guys you picked, but we really appreciate the honest feedback, because we will use that and improve, whether it's with you guys or someone else. And I like hearing that. That's really cool.
Yeah, I love that too. That's fantastic, because it's sort of a rising tide lifts all boats. You're helping people in the industry to improve, and that's going to benefit everyone. So, well, thank you very much. So we have been talking to Howie Ferguson of the Construction Owners Association of America. Appreciate your time, Howie. If people want to learn more, where do they go?
COAA.org. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the usuals. And I think all of our chapters have their own LinkedIn, Facebook, all those sorts of things. But we're pretty easy to find. I didn't mention this earlier, Michelle, but we're headquartered. We do still have a physical presence. We thought about getting rid of it, but we didn't, in a suburb of Atlanta called Austell, Georgia. But yeah, go to our website. You can find my address, email, phone, all that stuff. Happy to happy to talk to anyone. But thanks for having me, Michelle. It's a pleasure.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.